Morning, everyone, and welcome to the regular board briefing for the Multnomah County Commission. Vice Chair Jones-Dickson is attending virtually today. Audience members, I want to start by asking you to please silence your electronic devices. Also wanted to mention Commissioner Moyer is excused at 11:45 this morning. For those presenting today, please turn your mic on when you begin speaking and off when you've completed your remarks. And for all presenters, please state your name for the record before speaking or responding to questions. And I did want to just take a moment to introduce Emily Schultz, who is joining us this morning. She is stepping in to help out with some of the clerk duties as Tasia Nelson steps up into more of the interim head clerk role. And so just really glad to have such a great team helping us run these meetings. Thank you both so much. All right. With that, we will move over into our first briefing item today, which is a briefing on the resolution establishing Multnomah County's commitment to investigate and provide a plan for how the county can require financial assurances from CEI owners and operators. And this is something that is being brought forward by District 2, Commissioner Megan Moyer and her team. So I will turn it over to you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Just to let you know that this is coming from both District 1 and District 2. So I'll be brief and I'll let Commissioner Singleton speak and then introduce our panel. For many of you, I'm sure you are aware of the previous work that the county has done related to the critical energy infrastructure hub located in Northwest Portland, and slightly into unincorporated, but the bulk of it is in North Portland. The previous county commission did a study related to what would happen in an earthquake related to the CEI hub. Some of the highlights included the release, up to 194 million gallons of fuel, which is significantly larger than the size of the spill of the Deepwater Horizon. It also is uniquely challenging being located in such an urban setting. We know that there are several scenarios in which a release at the CEI hub could cause substantial catastrophe in our region, and particularly for the response necessary from Multnomah County. There are scenarios that could lead to significant loss of life and injury. There are scenarios in which we have toxic air due to the chemicals that are in many of these fuels, and could impact drinking water and many, many other tragedies. And as a local government, I appreciate the work that was done before this commission looking at this issue, and it certainly has been a priority in my district, and Commissioner Singleton has spoken about her district. A very real concern that we have not fully thought out our response and making sure that we have the resources necessary, not just for the county, but for all involved if such a disaster were to happen due to the fact that we are in an earthquake-prone zone. So I'm going to pass it to Commissioner Singleton, and then the first panelist will be Hayden from my office. But I did want to take a moment to thank everybody who has engaged in these conversations and helped us flush out this conversation today, and really the level of expertise that our county has in various departments has been very helpful in shaping this conversation and leading us down the path, one, to this resolution by identifying some areas that we need to go a little deeper on, but also looking at a framework to build on for a final ordinance. So I want to thank everybody. Certainly want to thank Salome in Commissioner Singleton's office, Chad Lycan, who's no longer with my office, but did a ton of work, and then again, all of the wonderful staff throughout the county who have been incredibly helpful answering some very specifically weird questions. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think this was maybe the first board action I took when I started here in December, working with Commissioner Myron, so have definitely appreciated you jumping right in to make sure that our communities are safe, and not that this doesn't impact larger Multnomah County, but I think our two districts, it's very clear, have immediate impacts that will be devastating. I don't like to be redundant. I want to just say yes, and thank you all for the work that you've done. And it's not just this go around. I know people were involved, as Commissioner Myron had been looking at how to move something forward. So we appreciate the ongoing dedication and commitment so we can get this done. And I will hand it over so we can have the panel start. Thanks.
And just to note, Commissioner Jones-Dickson has now joined us in person. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. For the record, my name is W. Hayden Ferris, and I'm the Policy Director for Commissioner Moyer. Today, I'll be providing an overview of the Critical Energy Infrastructure Hub, also known as the CEI Hub, summarizing what the CEI Hub is and its associated health and safety risks. Next slide, please. The CEI Hub is located on the west shore of the Willamette River. It's a 6-mile stretch of industrial development that holds 90% of all liquid fuel in Oregon. This includes the gas and diesel supply for the Portland metro area, jet fuel for PDX, and other hazardous materials. In total, the CEI Hub holds 630 tanks with a maximum capacity of 350.6 million gallons. Next slide, please. The CEI Hub is in the Cascadia Subduction Zone, also known as the CSZ, and there's a 26% chance of a large earthquake in the next 50 years. The CEI Hub sits on unstable soil, which is prone to liquefaction and lateral spreading. Liquefaction is when the water table rises during an earthquake and loosens soils, making the soils act more like a liquid than a solid, and lateral spreading is when the soils are spread towards the Willamette River. Both pose risks for tanks holding oil. It's estimated that upon a CSZ earthquake, the CEI Hub would release between 94.6 million and 193.7 million gallons of hazardous materials, which is equivalent to the BP Deepwater Horizon spill. And this would release the hazardous materials, of course, into land, water, and air. Next slide, please. These are just some more images of the CEI Hub showing the quantity and size of the tanks. Next slide, please. And then these are 2 snapshots of information portraying CEI Hub risks. The first graphic shows a likely scenario of gasoline particulates in the air 1 hour after a CSZ earthquake. The darker the color, the higher the concentration of gasoline particulates, and the yellow and orange in this graphic show areas at risk of ignition. In the second graphic, we see the burn risk to areas if an oil spill is ignited, and here, the darker the color, the higher the burn risk. Next slide, please. The CEI Hub poses a risk for Multnomah County. If a spill or release at the CEI Hub occurred, the county is responsible for emergency management and health responses immediately, but the county does not have the funding to cover these responses. Currently, CEI Hub owners/operators are not required to provide financial assurances with immediate payouts to cover the costs of Multnomah County's response. Next slide, please. So next steps are passing the CEI Hub resolution on February 19th, asking relevant county departments to review the draft ordinance, investigate and determine feasibility for provisions similar to those in the ordinance, and then reporting back to the board. Hopefully, with this information, the board will then pass an ordinance which will require CEI Hub owners/operators to prove they have the financial resources that would be immediately released to Multnomah County due to a release or spill at the CEI Hub. Next slide, please. Thank you. I just want to say much of the information and graphics came from the ECHO Northwest 2022 study, and I'm happy to answer any questions now, but there's going to be another panel that may answer those questions you have right now.
Great, thank you so much, Hayden. I think is this your first time presenting at the board?
This is
well, great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, thank you so much for this. So we have the presentation, we have the resolution that we are planning for February 19th in front of us as part of the meeting materials. So I can open it up for questions. I'll start with you, Commissioner Brim Edwards, since D1's and D2.
We do have another panel.
Oh, well then, never mind, we'll have more panel. Do we have any questions for Hayden, though, I guess, first?
Might as well do it all at once.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and invite that other panel up.
And just to frame this panel, we are asking we have asked the different departments who would have responsibility in responding to a disaster, to give us a little bit of a look into the types of activities that they would need to do. Obviously, with a special look at Department of Emergency Management with their coordinating role, public health, et cetera. We have also have John Wazinski with us because of the really important role John played in getting us here today. So if there are any questions specifically about either the study or the work that he and his office previously did, he's here to answer that if necessary. And then also asked Casey O'Donnell from Risk Management, who indulged us in a deep dive into a preliminary look at different types of financial assurance tools and why we're kind of going in a little bit different direction than the original CEI proposal, due largely to those conversations and learning a lot about what would best meet Multnomah County's needs in an emergency. So I pass it over to you, and I thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Chris Voss, and I'm the Director of Emergency Management here. So I'm here to sort of talk a little about sort of what our roles are and sort of the criticality of sort of the county's aspect here, because this is sort of an interesting scenario, and you guys are certainly swinging at the fences for this one. We would not be the first responders in this type of event. Obviously, we are following direction from many of those first responders. So in an incident like this, after Cascadia, you're gonna see our fire department and the hazmat teams literally draw a circle around this area. That circle may be enormous though, and this is where it gets interesting. That circle, knowing that you've got hazardous materials that are sort of spreading in the plumes, it could be a mile, it could be 2 miles away from the CEI hub. So all depending on humidity, wind speeds, how much is released. So they're gonna be taking those samples. And now this is where it gets interesting. While they're responsible for everything inside that circle, everybody that lives inside that circle is going to be asked to leave, and then that falls on us. So the potentially tens of thousands of people that are displaced, they will be ours to sort of make sure that they can be cared for from a mass care standpoint. The county has other roles with regard to communications. You know, we may be in the world of air sampling here to sort of make sure we understand the levels. I also want to just sort of acknowledge, while people think of this event as something that will happen, I want to talk a little about sort of the duration, because this is also where we're going to accrue a lot of costs. You know, Exxon Valdez was cleaned up for 4 years. So when you see a spill of this magnitude, it's not going to be something that will be cleaned up and people will be able to get back to their homes quickly. It's something that will be impacting us for potentially months and years, and all of those responsibilities are ours. Other things, as we stand up our EOC and we're monitoring this, you'll see probably parts of the county that are impacted and maybe even cut off, like Salve Island, which means now the county's responsible for road closures, bridge closures, like I said, air monitoring, communications. We also then would be dealing, obviously, with the utility impacts as well, because everybody inside that circle that the fire department is trying to keep away from this incident, it also means there's no restoration. So every utility that's being impacted by this as well can't get back to sort of restore people as well, which means the more and more people need support from the county to just make sure they get through this event, and get through this event that will last, like I said, months and potentially years. So I'm not here to talk about sort of there are many partners here, and one of the interesting things with regard to costs that we would accrue is people have often asked me, but like, well, wouldn't the Red Cross support sheltering in this type of event if you have this huge sheltering event? And I absolutely believe that they would at some point. But I think we also have to acknowledge that there are literally hundreds of thousands of people on the West Coast that would also be impacted. And it's likely that those resources would be so scarce that we don't know how much of that resource we would ultimately see. And that means it once again lands on us. We've not seen a Cascadia-like event in this country ever. And I think that I can't even, in my role, sort of fully understand every aspect and how all of those nuances will impact other pieces. How do we move people when we can't move people on roads with the utilities not working? How are we feeding people? This is really, really complex, and I think our costs are very much going to grow because of those levels of complexities and just because of the duration. So I want to thank you for allowing me to talk today, and I'm happy to sort of answer questions, but I know I've got some other panel members. I also, while I didn't talk numbers, I think it's important to recognize that our costs, even for just sheltering, certainly would be in the tens of millions of dollars. This is not a short-term event. This is a really, really long-term event.
Good morning.
Do you want to answer questions now? Or?
Nope, we'll go ahead and go
Okay.
through everyone, and then we'll do
Good
questions.
morning. My name is Kirsten Aird. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Public Health Director here at Multnomah County. And at a very high level, I'm here to talk about the health impacts and then what the health department's role is in particular for an event like this. And I really look to try to think of the scale of what an event could be. Certainly we're talking about earthquake, in which this event would already make something terrible worse. And so in context to all the other things that won't be operating, that won't be available, that's kind of where I started. But it's fair to say that there could be other events that happen here that could just be a leak, just be a fire, in which the health department would also play a role. So in thinking about the health impacts, certainly we're looking at hazardous air quality issues, leakage into the soil, into the rivers. Those are going to have long-term impacts. When you think of Sauvie Island, there's a whole farming system out there, and if the soil's impacted, you're looking at all sorts of potential challenges. When we think about injury from fire, the workforce there that could be on site, but certainly the neighboring communities. So thinking of injury, structural damages, exposures to the first responders and the health issues that they'll experience, both acute and long-term, and then again, the long-term impact of the water system. So when we think about those health issues, then the other health issue I do want to call out, which often gets ignored but has slightly been suggested, is that the materials, the gas and the oil that's at this location services our hospitals. In an earthquake, maybe they'll be up, maybe they won't, but all of the infrastructure of moving people will not be available. And so the disruption to the hospital system in and of itself, and the reduced capacity and the potential need of moving people from the hospital to other places, and then moving folks injured here into hospitals, that whole thing around transportation and movement will be impacted, surely just because of, earthquake aside, not having access to the materials that would create energy for those locations. So your health department operates under Emergency Support Function 8, and that would not be in a silo. So we would work with our neighboring local public health authorities, the Oregon Health Authority, DEQ, EPA, the federal response system, all of that. But in general, what a health department is responsible for during an emergency is coordinating and mobilizing, providing the personnel, the equipment, and the supplies to address the immediate needs of a disaster. When we think about what's needed to do that, it's surveillance and data. Where are your people collecting the information, monitoring and reporting? That's going to be around air quality, but it's also going to be around acute emergency use and injury. We're going to be the ones supporting the hospitals and the clinics and the emergency management system, and where surge capacity is needed. What do clinicians need to be looking for? Where do they need to be stationed and based? Certainly managing the movement of patients and managing the need for surge. But again, if this is in context to something happening along the West Coast, the surge capacity is going to be really thin because it's going to be shared across multiple locations. The other thing we're going to be responsible for is disseminating the right personal protective equipment, also known as PPE, for staff, for volunteers, and for impacted community members. We also will be looking at mass fatality management. Those are hard words to say, and so I myself am taking a deep breath. But when we think about the need for body bags, the need for cooling systems for the deceased, and then also making sure that contamination that could be in the deceased doesn't also cause further challenges. We are going to be responsible for supporting the basic safety and public health needs for the community, so coordinating and managing evacuations, ensuring clean water for impacted individuals and families, those RAP services that we learned a lot about during COVID, but also thinking about what the long-term impact can be to a groundwater system that is not clean. And we'll be doing the advisories and the guidance on potable water. And again, when I say we, I say the royal we of public health and our decentralized system. It's always in collaboration with our state partners. Back to our roles, communicating effectively, so disseminating health information in a way that's culturally and linguistically responsive, and also done very much in partnership with communities. So the community-based organizations, the leaders in the community who will be listened to is who we'll be partnering with as well. Providing that consistent spokesperson at a health level, that's usually your local public health administrator or health officer, and then again, collaborating with community. When I think of our statutory responsibilities in response to something like this, it's very similar, but again, it's issuing and enforcing emergency health orders done in collaboration with the state, communicating and coordinating with healthcare providers, and doing so in a situation like this is also going to be not only OHA, but DEQ and the state fire marshal. Using communication systems, addressing the needs of vulnerable populations, and collecting data. And then also thinking about those tests that might need to be done that could be in response to a communicable disease that could actually move in an environment like this. And then certainly also doing lab testing and work in collaboration with our state and federal partners for environmental toxins, both air, water, and soil. And then continuing that long-term investigation around environmental health hazards. So that's kind of what our role would be in an event of this nature.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. For the record, my name is Casey O'Donnell. I'm the Insurance Program Manager for Multnomah County. Traditionally, I don't get involved in these higher-level discussions. I'm usually worried about liability claims, insuring our buildings, working on property claims, things like that. So I was looped into this conversation previously with John and sustainability and with Commissioner Moyer's staff, asking about alternative risk transfer mechanisms that might be in place, risk financing, because as Chris pointed out, the claims process and the cleanup process lasts for years. So if the Exxon Valdez took 4 years to clean up, it took decades to finally get all the claims process and litigation taken care of. So that's problematic because insurance tends to be after the dust clears, then the money gets transferred over, which leaves everybody trying to figure out what to do with regards to financing. So I was asked to see if there were any alternative risk transfer mechanisms that were available. In particular, one of the problems with say, pollution liability is that Multnomah County wouldn't necessarily be the beneficiary or direct beneficiary of that policy because that policy is written to the owners of the CEI hub properties, and so that's to cover their liability risk associated with pollution liability. There are a couple of mechanisms, or a couple of potential options that could work. One would be a parametric policy. Parametric policy has the benefit of having an immediate payout based off of certain triggers. So for instance, and it gets refined because it's a relatively new insurance product. So the seismic triggers and where they measure the ground movement, make a determination as to whether or not you're going to have a payout. And a parametric policy has the benefit of allowing for Multnomah County to be the beneficiary of the policy. So in theory, you could require the CEI hub owners to purchase parametric policies naming Multnomah County as the payee if those specific triggers are met. So then the question becomes, how do you make a determination of what those triggers are going to be, and more appropriately, what the actual risk is associated with each individual property? And taking into account, and that's actuarial stuff, taking into account if those properties have been seismically retrofitted, what the total amount of the exposure is, what kind of pollutants are necessarily being stored there. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much what I have. Parametric policies, cat bonds are also a potential option, which are catastrophe bonds, similar system, but I'm not sure that we could require them to purchase and then have us as the payee like the parametric policy. In all situations, for parametric policies and for catastrophe bonds, the payout is almost immediate. There are some accounting responsibilities that have to be met. So for instance, with a parametric policy, there's usually a period of time where you have to show how you've used the money, but it's a little bit different from a pollution liability standpoint. And I do think that there are some FEMA implications with regard to public recovery, where if we show that we've got this recovery from the parametric policy, that FEMA might decide to take that off the top. But it would be a way of, potentially a way to front load our response costs.
You, Casey.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Brian Smith. I'm the county's purchasing manager. I use he, him pronouns. And thank you very much for this opportunity for us to present to you today. The board's faced with lots of policy decision that has potential for many, many directions to go forward. And I was asked to please weigh in on kind of, okay, how do we move forward with this? And from a procurement perspective, I'm suggesting that we do a request for information after the board sets some general direction for how it is that we want to go forward. Because as you've heard here, there are lots of unknowns and many options for moving forward. And a request for information process is a information gathering process rather than a supplier selection process. So it doesn't result in a contract, but it allows us to go out to the community, get a lot more information, because this is a very unique kind of problem that we're trying to solve. And it's useful to do a request for information when we're totally not sure what the scope is or who's out there in the supplier community who can help us move forward with getting this figured out. And the timing briefly on that is it's variable. It's anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months. And that time frame is really dependent on kind of the 3 stages. The first one is drafting the RFI document. How well is it? Do we know what we want? How specific can we actually be? RFIs are usually brief, just a few pages, so they can be fairly simple to put into place. And then how long do we want to have it open for the community to provide input? Our standard to have things open is generally about 30 days, but I wouldn't recommend anything less than 2 weeks, just so people have the opportunity to see it and put together some answers and respond to us. And then the question is, what do you do with the responses? So we're not doing a full-blown evaluation and making awards, but at the end of it, after it closes, you'll have a lot of information to help feed the next steps in the process, whatever those look like. So that's a brief overview of the RFI and what I think could help the board kind of as the next step after you've passed the ordinance and set some direction.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah. So we can open up for questions unless there are any additional comments. Okay. Commissioner Brim-Edwards.
Thanks for the presentation. One thing I had to just request, some of the testimony was read, and I was wondering if we could get a copy of it. There was some excellent just overview information. that's possible. Great, thank you. I'm going to go back to November 21st of 2024, when we had a vote on this before. And I think two questions. I think it didn't advance, it was on a 2-2 vote. And there were a couple issues at play. One was whether to let the state take the lead. And I know last session there was some legislative work done. And I don't know if this is a question for you or for the sponsors, of whether this is the county going back to taking the lead with the state not doing something. Of course, it looks like the planned timeline is before the next long session, so I'm curious, that piece, go ahead.
Sure, I'll take that. It's a nuanced answer because this version, and part of the reason to do a resolution before going right to a ordinance is that we are taking a little bit of a different path than the original. It does incorporate that global insurance component, and to be honest, I would be fine with the state of Oregon taking that on. I think that they have more capacity to do that than we do. Again, I don't know if they will. You know, having a bill and it passing are not always the same thing, but I don't think we've opposed that as a group. The difference from this resolution from the previous, and why we need to get a little bit more information and also listen to the community on the issue, is to specifically make sure that there's a mechanism to fund the response, that first year of response, and dig a little deeper on both exactly what we would do and cost it out so that we're asking for the right size. Nobody's trying to overcharge anybody, but also to have those conversations and to figure out, what is the right product mix, what is the right risk level where we would set a triggering event. There's a lot of technical expertise that I think we would like to be in an ordinance that isn't. The state bill has a preemption, which would mean we would have to stop this work. And currently, they don't look at products. They're allowable, but they don't require products that pay out on a triggering event. They rely on the typical, and they do define liability a little bit broader, but I would say not as broad as an act of God or some like an earthquake. I feel really concerned about their language there. But again, if the state preempts us, then we are at the mercy of whomever we would have to go ask. Please give us money for this. We don't have $100 to $150 million in a reserve for this. And again, like the example of the Exxon Valdez or Deepwater Horizon, these were decades of litigation. So I think it's unrealistic with the state model that we would be able to have an immediate access. And so I think what we're looking here at is, yes, there's a global liability issue. In fact, our language is very similar to the state bill. Go ahead, go do that, great. I think that would be great if the state did that. But I am very uncomfortable with the state preempting us in a way that would not allow us to have access to the resources necessary to respond immediately.
Great. I would just add that I think there's missing language in the state bill. There's public health is mentioned very briefly at the front end and not with any real content in the meat of the bill. So there's additionally, I know that there's a push to not have, well, one, we always ask to not preempt counties at the state level, but at a minimum, can they get the language in that we need, I think is another piece that Commissioner Moyer and I have been lobbying with the state to do. So I want to say that I think it's important that if there's feedback from this group, as well as John, that we want to make sure we're bringing into the conversations with the state. We're trying to kind of do the both and right now as they move through session.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I supported moving forward the last time is sort of the theory of sort of all politics is local, and what is could be very devastating for us here locally is something very far away from other parts of the state. Not that they don't care about us, but I was concerned that a state solution would not be responsive nor actually get done because the Multnomah County delegation is just not the majority of the legislation. So I'm very supportive of us moving forward with something locally, and if that prompts the state to do something, great, but I don't think we should wait or depend on them to have a solution that works. So the other issue that came up last time, and I'm just curious about your thinking about the workaround. Well, there's two things. One, I would encourage that there be, as soon as we get something out, active engagement with all of the interested parties, because they actually, even though we'd had a long discussion, they came out at the very end and all of a sudden wanted to have a whole host of discussions, raised a bunch of issues, so like we should just get that out right away. But one of the issues they raised is just like this product isn't, the product we're looking for is not available on the market. Is that why we're going out for an RFI, just to see what products are available? Or is there actually, it was hard to discern whether that was just an excuse for people to not want the ordinance to move forward, or it actually was a legitimate issue.
Commissioner, my understanding of, and why I was suggesting an RFI is there is still a lot of unknown, and for example, one of the questions one could ask in an RFI is what products or other approaches that we're not thinking of would be a benefit for us to be looking at. So that's the kind of thing that you could put in an RFI to help us figure out potential pathways towards actually coming up with a policy that could then be implemented.
Great, so we might have some clarity on that question.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, my last question is, when we considered this before, sort of the last minute push by the industry was, do the Washington State thing. Are there other states that have something similar or a similar product, or have we looked at them and that we haven't found something that matches our needs or that would be responsive enough?
And I don't know, do you guys feel comfortable answering that? No, I think that, and I don't know, John, if that's you or Commissioner Moyer, if like Hayden might have some of these answers for that. Yeah. Thank you, John.
Hi, Commissioner. My name is John Boshetinsky. I'm the Director of Sustainability here at Multnomah County. When we looked at this last time, the most direct comparison was to Washington that had recently implemented a similar type of policy at the statewide level. And then the other comparison we were looking at was California. So it took a different approach, but it was a longer standing approach there. So, but I haven't delved into other states to see if they also have similar requirements, something that I would be happy to do as part of this renewed process.
So you're saying that Washington State already has something similar?
Correct, yeah, the Washington
Or
State.
mechanism?
Yes, that's correct.
And it hasn't like decimated the industry, or, I mean, it's still working? We've heard a lot of horror stories about what might happen if we actually tried to protect our community.
I don't think any of the regulated entities, which are a wider group of entities than were proposed to be regulated under the county approach. It includes vessels, for example, ocean-going vessels. I'm not aware that any of those companies have ceased operation due to the requirements. But again, that's something I can explore in more detail if needed.
Thank you. That's all my questions. I'm looking forward to next steps.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jones Dixon.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this forward, Commissioner Singleton and Commissioner Moyer. The only question I have is just, are we coordinating with the City of Portland? Because I know they have their CEI Hub Policy Review team, I believe, through the Planning and Sustainability Office. And if so, how is that influencing our work moving forward?
Do you want to answer
Nope.
that? I can answer my conversations, and then I'm happy if you also are having conversations on a professional level. I have been talking to commissioners, counselors, they're counselors now, sorry, about this. They are also interested and are looking at it from some different angles than we are, because they have different regulatory authority than we do. And to be honest, I do think part of what we should do moving forward is combine some of those conversations. But we're really lucky, and I'll turn it over to Director Voss around that. This is obviously a coordinated response, and so we should, even though financial assurance tools might be different, the response itself absolutely has to be coordinated, and that is not my area of expertise, so I'll turn that over.
Yeah, and to sort of piggyback off of that, we do coordinate a lot with the city, with the state, and even to some degree, the federal government has sort of participated. They're very much on the response side, and we also very much coordinate on sort of the mitigation side. We don't focus a whole lot on who's paying for this after the fact side. So I think that's an interesting nuance, and I personally also worked with the state when they sort of put together their rules, as they have sort of regulatory authority over the CEI Hub on what that would ultimately mean. As you know, the CEI Hub right now is going through a process where they are putting together sort of mitigation plans to sort of reduce risk. So yes, there's a ton of coordination, but ultimately, who's paying for it? A little bit less so.
Got it. My question is specifically the work that they're doing around the CEI. It's my understanding that they're doing like specific policy work, and are we looking at that? And maybe that's Director John, a question to you. Like, how will that influence, if any, this work moving forward, or the proposal moving forward?
Commissioner Jones-Dixon, the city is looking currently at a zoning amendment for the CEI Hub that is under development with the Planning Commission, and sort of maybe the very high-level summation of that is that they would require, the kind of big-ticket item was they require some reduction in total capacity. Hayden mentioned, sort of this 320 million gallons of capacity. A lot of that isn't utilized, and so the city's contemplating a requirement that would reduce some of that capacity, and then that has some overlap with what Chris was talking about in terms of the DEQ requirements as well. But so we're aware of what they're working on, and there's some interagency working groups that we participate in, but we're not directly involved in any of their policy work on their zoning amendment.
Got it.
As far as I'm aware.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, and then I have a couple of questions. So I appreciate the questions from Commissioners Brum Edwards and Jones Dixon, because I actually had questions the same thing about the city's authority, or the city's response and how that's coordinated, in this kind of event, as well as some of the city's authority on this issue compared to ours, and so I appreciate the conversation around this. I know one of the things that came up when we were contemplating the previous ordinance on this was just making sure that we had the right expertise, right? Because this is kind of a new area of work for the county and new, mechanisms and things, and making sure that we had the right folks there. And so, Brian, I know you talked about the RFI. Is that, and sorry, I know you guys are playing musical chairs a little bit there, but just want to, I think my concern is really making sure that we are engaging with the right folks who can help advise us on the next steps of this, and making sure that we're thinking through everything, like as an organization, if we're taking on this, this as a policy and something for the county, that we are being advised in the right way. And so is that part of the intention of, with you recommending an RFI as the next step, is to try to suss out like who those entities are that might be doing this kind of work, or and help us engage with them for this?
Chair Vega-Peterson, yes. I think that is certainly one of the things that could be included in an RFI. The advantage of the RFI is that it is a data collection tool that is public. And so it is posted publicly. Everybody has an opportunity to see it and to participate in it. So it has the advantage of, as opposed to simply getting smart people in the room and coming up with a, hey, who do we know kind of thing. And so that public-facing piece, I think, gives us the ability to ask whatever questions we think are the most important ones to answer, in order for you to have more information for what direction do we go, and do we in fact, are we on the right policy track? Are there other things that we're not considering? So it can be very general at that level, but it could also be very specific in terms of, if you decide, no, what we really want to do is this particular type of insurance policy, it could be, hey, who's out there in the community who can advise on this or provide those kinds of policies. So it can vary. It's a very flexible tool, but the advantage is it's very public, and you can gather lots of information with it.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's super helpful.
You're welcome.
Because I think the two areas specifically, and there's probably more, but was, about the kind of the financial mechanisms and the financial tools and things. And Casey, you talked a little bit about like what that could look like. So appreciate that. And then also, but from like a legal perspective, this is kind of an area of work that we don't normally do on a day-to-day basis at the county. And so those are the areas specifically that I know have been raised. And so just want to make sure that as we move forward with this, those things are, considered, so that we can move forward, I think, in the best way possible for what this needs to look like for the county. And then I appreciate the work. I know that there is the bill down at the state, and it does feel like it meets kind of the, some of the earlier iterations of this, but I appreciate like this is really focusing on the county and our need to respond and what our responsibilities would be in this event. So I just want to appreciate the work of Commissioner Moyer and Commissioner Singleton, and especially your teams, for all of the work on this. I think those are the main questions I have. I know Chris Neal is here, and we have Tracy Massey from the COO's office, and I think that as this work moves forward, having the COO's team looped in to help really think about and plan for how this best fits within the organization, and how we can best align that with the work and the structure is going to be important too. So I know that they've already had conversations with your offices about that, and looking forward to that continuing. All right, that was all my questions. All right. Any final comments on this? No?
No.
Okay.
I'm just going to say thank you again.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I think the perspectives that you brought to this were really helpful in the conversation, so thank you very much. All right, so that concludes our first briefing for this morning. We're going to move into our work session format for the second one, which is going to be a work session on the board rules. So we're going to take about like a 3-minute recess, and then we'll reconvene in the seats below. right, hi, everyone. We are done with recess. Now we are going to move into our work session board rules, version 5, and we have Brendan Finn here from District 4 here to help introduce this item. Good morning.
Great. Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. Good morning. For the record, I'm Brendan Finn, Chief of Staff to Commissioner Jones-Dixon, Mr. Vice Chair, joined by our County Attorney, Jenny Madcore. And I'd like to recognize Reagan Gray from the District 1 office, who did a lot of work on what we're going to be discussing today. And I just want to signal our appreciation as this was I don't want to say we co-conspired, but there was a lot of collaboration between our offices on this work. So much thanks to her. So today, the purpose of this work session is to provide hopefully final direction to your Multnomah County Board rules. These will come back to you after they are formalized and finalized by the County Attorney's Office. So today, you're providing direction to Jenny and her team to do so. I'm just here to talk a little bit recap the process that brought us here today, and then hand it off to you for your discussion. So this did start in earnest a little bit over a year ago with the work of some outside expertise from Mary Hull Caballero, the former auditor for the city of Portland, who interviewed each of you, also did some research on best practices and put forward some reports. We want to thank Mary. I know we have in the past, but thank her again for her work on that. For those who know her, she's class act. So building off of this, the District 1 and District 4 offices brought forward additional considerations and proposals regarding board rules. We did come before the board on that, and you will remember there was 2 separate documents you were working from, and we'll admit it was a little confusing at the time. That there was definitely an expression from the board that you would like to work from one document that you could finalize and bring forward. So our office took the lead on that. I want to thank Ashley Graff, our Strategy and Policy Director for District 4, who independently solicited input and feedback from each of your offices so we did not create a serial deliberated document. So thank you all for your participation in that and meeting the deadlines so we could be here today to move it forward. But I do want to give a special thanks to Jenny Madcore here, who's been with us every step of the way. I was thinking about this morning, as she deserves an Olympic medal for what she's had to put up with and endure over the past few months. So thank you, Jenny. So with that, Madam Chair, that's basically the process that got us here. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know Jenny's going to be here to answer those that the board may have. Other than that, I can step away and let the discussion begin.
All right. Thank you so much. Just appreciate that. How do you all want to kick it off? Walking through? Oh, yeah. I mean, do we have, yeah, we can call upon you as, yes.
Did everyone get this document, clarifications, questions? Anyone, discussion? No?
No.
You did get it? Okay. It might be nice to look at some of the areas, instead of going line by line. There were some areas where there were various versions.
I don't think all of us have that document.
Oh.
Where did it come from? Yeah.
That's a really great question.
I have copies.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess I should have clarified. So during the time
Okay.
that Ashley solicited all of that input, I should have mentioned this in the minute. Not all of it coincided, and there was requests for clarification on certain items, and there was items that needed to be discussed further because there wasn't 100% support for those items. I forwarded those to your offices last week, but I do have copies right now.
All right, great. We would appreciate those copies. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, Jenny Madcore, County Attorney, if people don't have specific questions and so that we best use our time here, I've also identified after talking to folks some of the major areas, and maybe I could start the discussion off by highlighting some things and we can get our conversation flowing a little bit about areas that you may have concerns or you might want to tweak. Stepping back a second, the board rules they're your rules. We have some guidelines under our charter and under the code and under public meetings law about how we conduct our meetings, but these rules are really about how can we assure that the processes and procedures that you're using during your weekly board meetings, briefings, and other considerations are really helping us move the business of Multnomah County forward. So one of the great things that is included in here, and Mary had recommended it and staff included it, and I just think it's wonderful, is under section 2, it says that one of the first things we're going to do each year is the board is going to re-adopt its rules. And the reason why I think this is really a really great addition is because it refamiliarizes us with the process of if these rules are serving us, let's keep going with them, and if they don't, let's vote to amend them. That's a once-a-year process, but I think that will also get us more familiarized with, being flexible in these rules, and so we can amend them as often as needed to really meet the needs of the board. So that's one great thing, and I don't know if anybody wanted to make comments on that, but I'll just keep going.
I have a comment on that one. So I think I also agree that that is a great idea, and I know that there's also been, I don't know that this needs to be in the board rules per se, but I know we also had talked about adopting a calendar for the board, and that was something that we shared, the vice chair and I sent out to the board for consideration, or actually for any feedback if it didn't work for folks, because otherwise we're going to go with it. But I do, one of the things is it doesn't seem reasonable to have it as the first regular Thursday meeting of the year, especially if there are a lot of new commissioners who are coming on. I'm just thinking like last January, if the very first thing was voting on board rules. So I just would like to see a little bit of flexibility for that, maybe before the end of January or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's great. Just, and the rule as it's written right now, let's talk about what's there, and then we can, if we want to massage that language,
Okay.
or if we have support, that's language I can add in. But currently it says at the first regular Thursday meeting of each year, or the soonest practicable Thursday in January.
Perfect.
So that was added in, but we can make it more flexible.
Oh, no, I think that's great. I was looking at an old version of it, so that's great.
So one of the benefits of keeping it at the first meeting, which is sort of aligned with how the legislature and Congress and everything do it, sort of one of your first votes, is then, just to your point, is like you have new commissioners, but I think then it really will, it will mean that orientation actually happens before people sit at the dais, which, I mean, normal cycles, people get elected in November, you have the whole month of December. That's.
Except for folks who are working, like that presumes availability that doesn't necessarily exist for people.
So,
Well, this is exactly the purpose of this meeting, right? Which is just
we
for
have
the
2 months
board.
almost. We have 2 months almost. I mean, I got my orientation 3 weeks after I sat down, but I didn't come in at January, and it was a real disadvantage not to have that happen before I sat at the dais. So I think it's good practice just to, like, as you start your year to have it done, either that or a date certain.
I think that again, and I apologize because I was looking at an older version. I really appreciate the phrase as soon as practical Thursday in January. So it does say like, we're not going to have this stretched out. I also think the difference is, I think the last times that the board rules had been updated was like 2014 or something like that. So that isn't going to be the case now. Like going forward, these things will be updated more regularly. So, so it won't be like that there is so much that may need to be contemplated. And I think that it would be, if there are small changes that are needed, January seems a sufficient time to do those.
Yeah, I agree with the flexibility. I think then it gives decision-making power to the commissioners who are actually sitting here. So I think having the both and language is helpful.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for those thoughts. The next area that I would like to highlight, and of course, if anybody has anything else, just jump right in. The next area that I would like to highlight is how matters get onto the board agenda. And this has been an issue that our board has dealt with over time. So if we move over to section 5, which is on page 4, Currently, the practice requires that in order to get a place on the agenda, you need to submit your materials, and materials are your agenda placement form, any board-adopted documents, and then any presentations on the Wednesday at noon prior to the requested meeting. That's our current rule. This proposed revision is different. Okay, and so this proposed revision says that in order to get a place on the agenda, what you need to do is you need to submit an agenda placement form to the board clerk. And then the board clerk will schedule, if we go to subsection C, it says APR submitted by a county elected official will be placed on the board agenda on the date requested or as soon thereafter when there is space available.
Okay, I don't know what's going on. Mine doesn't say that. So this is the one that was from the board materials.
Page 5, could you, in which section number is it?
So my copy here still says a final agenda packet, and it has an agenda packet including APR, documents required for board approval, resolution, ordinance, materials, information, and presentations.
Yeah, that's under section 1, but if you go up to B,
Right, but in section C, on this piece of paper, says a final agenda packet must be submitted by a county. It doesn't say APR.
that's the old version.
So the.
Okay, so we might have some different versions.
Yeah, so what I'm gonna, I just opened up the board rules that are on the current meeting materials, and I don't know if there were updates that were made recently. Yeah, so this was, this is just what's up there right now, and so C does say APR.
APR submitted.
APR submitted by a county.
So there were so many versions going around, and the version control does get really, really challenging for staff. So it is inconvenient that we may not be working from the same drafts right now. But the issue here is, how do we get issues onto the board agenda? Is it by submitting an APR where you say, I'm going to save that date, and then 6 months in the future, that date is yours and nobody else can take that date? Or, would be a new process, or do we want the process to be that you do not get to save your date until your agenda packet materials are completed?
And I can talk about the discussion, because we did go from the latter to the full form. Okay, I'm confusing myself in explaining this. What was brought out around the first one, where you'd have to have an entire packet ready, is you might be saying, like, we're going to have conversations about potential revenue in August, because that we would need to do that in time for taxes. So we might know now that we want to have a conversation in August, and we may want to, so this is a time certain agenda process is what is being proposed. And so we may go to the board clerk and say, can we reserve an hour the first Thursday of October, whatever, I'm making this up. And the APR version would say, you just have to turn in an APR, but 1 week prior, you have to turn in all the presentation stuff that would go with it. In the first draft, it implied even if you wanted to reserve in August, you would have to have all the information, which I think is unrealistic if we're doing work leading up to it. So that was the clarification, where in the version that starts with APR, all you would need to reserve the time would be the APR. What you would need to do a week prior on that Wednesday is you would need to have the full packet, versus having everything ready when you want to reserve the time. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And then I guess my question is maybe for Tasia or Sarah or Jenny, who does that work for the process to have the APR ahead of time, and then the materials would be aligned with kind of what currently is in the board rules for elected officials?
That makes sense to me.
Okay. I just mean from the meeting management standpoint. Okay, great. So we're getting a yes from the audience.
And I do, as far as conversation, and just as a little devil's advocate here, I do want, it's the only concern I would have is, I think a placeholder is fine, but how strong is that placeholder? Does that placeholder, does it mean that nobody else can use that place? Because if that's the case, then by the time Wednesday at noon comes around, let's say I've reserved something for, in October, I reserved it, that's my time. Another commissioner over here wanted to have that time, but wasn't able to get it because it's already reserved for me, and then I don't turn my materials in, which is a real-world problem that we face, because sometimes getting materials all together just can't happen in the real world. So is there any way that the board would like to have the possibility to have a placeholder, but then still have it be subject to some sort of conversation amongst the board, which is to say, like, well, your placeholder is there, some horse trading or something like that.
Can I ask Brendan?
Oh, Mike.
Can I ask Brendan to talk about how the city has done it previously? Because they had a time certain. My understanding.
And this isn't time certain. This is just how you're reserving time.
Yeah. Can you talk about how agendas changed?
Well, and you can see later on that talks about the process for time certains, which is you can reserve those heading out, and the other ones with the APRs are just to reserve it. I want it on that day. And you can also reserve a time certain, because you may be having items like the ones we just discussed with the CEI Hub, where you're going to want to have it right at 11 o'clock because you're going to have people there and testimony and experts and elected officials and those sorts of things.
So I actually have the same concern about the time certain and materials only coming, like if it's not going to actually happen, because with the order of the meeting and that being first, and I'm worried that we don't schedule other things that need to get done and that we have agenda time for, but because we've held a time certain slot that's now empty, then we're pushing agendas back and back.
Yeah, and
So even though maybe that wasn't what Jenny was asking, but I think for,
It's related.
yeah.
It's related.
yeah, and the practice of the city is that if that time certain wasn't there, that time doesn't, if it's not been held, it goes towards the regular agenda. So you would just do the regular agenda items. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think the challenge is we're often fighting for agenda space because of how much we need to get done at certain times. And I don't mean fighting like fisticuffs, like we're just all want to get our stuff in there. And so if we're holding time certain slots, if, let's say, Commissioner Moyer had something on time certain and decides she doesn't need it, but it's the week before, and I had an item that we postponed for 2 weeks, I don't have enough time to get materials together and take that time slot. Does that make sense? So I'm just, yeah, I get that we would roll to the next thing. It's just the stacking that I worry about of things getting pushed back and back and back, and then we're not actually utilizing the full board time.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And since we've taken on the vice chair role and I've been involved with the snapshot meetings and understanding what's happening, we would have to work together closely as all 5 offices to make sure we're balancing all that, to make sure, like, I have this coming, or our department may feel the same way. So it does require more management of making sure that those times are there so the work can be accomplished.
I actually have 2 issues with just that section about reserving time, certain slots. I think we should have some sort of, you can do that, because what could happen is somebody could just submit for the majority of them, and it seems like we should have some sort of equitable distribution. Like, you could submit for, like, there's X number of time, time slots throughout the year, divided by 5 or whatever you want to do it, and you can implement it. It turns out if somebody doesn't use their allotment, then they're free, but it seems like just saying first come, first serve potentially leads some inequities. So that's one thing. The other thing is, and this has been less of an issue this year, it was a major issue last year, that we had huge issues, and it's sort of like, well, it's 12 o'clock, we're leaving. And if we're comparing to the city has that, whatever, overflow time in the afternoon that they can go to. So I just think we should be thinking about our days. And I think it's less of an issue with Tuesdays, because usually there's not an action, and so we can, it usually fits within the time, but on board meeting days, it seems like we might want to have that option to go in the afternoon and be deliberate about it, because I just look at all these things, and then also, staff can put things on, and it always surprised me for a public body that how little actually of time the board meeting there is for deliberation and action on the meeting days. That, I mean, whether it's the school board or the city, there's actually more time on the meeting days, not the briefing days.
So to that point, Commissioner, our previous board rules said that the meetings would go till noon, so it was in the rules. These revisions at Section 4, subsection C is where I have it. It says board meetings are on Thursdays and other days as necessary for the board to meet as a legislative body and deliberate on business. So that does allow flexibility to move into the afternoon. But I think that it is an important discussion for this board to have about how are you going to schedule yourselves, and what certainty will you have to be able to schedule yourselves on Tuesday afternoons and Thursday afternoons every week, and then also executive sessions and special meetings as needed. So if you want more certainty in there, that would be something that we would add in. We added more flexibility here, but then that leaves the question, are we going to go till 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon?
I do have
I wasn't suggesting that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, during the budget, you get there, but.
I do have a suggestion, only as a potential remedy to what Jenny brought up. I don't think it addresses Commissioner Singleton's or Commissioner Brim Edwards' concerns about overall agenda management and making sure, but we could add that you have to reconfirm your agenda placement 2 weeks in advance if you've scheduled out, so that there's enough time if somebody else wanted that for them to be prepared. Like, it's like a go, no go. Like, you're either gonna do it or you're not. Please decide 2 weeks in advance. I don't know if that might at least alleviate that a little bit, because I hear, if you bail a day before, there's no real way to fill that same time. I don't know, that's a thought.
So those are exactly the sort of suggestions that can really help us get these rules finalized to make sure that they are meeting your expectations. And I think that it's maybe something for your further consideration as you read the rules and think about it. One of the guiding principles that I would like the board to have is that the actual scheduling of the agendas is moving over to our board clerk. And so Tasia and our new staff will be the ones who are actually receiving all the information and putting it in. And this should be, in its essence, and I think ideally, a ministerial function, one which does not require judgment or weighing who I like better or what issue I like better or how hot the issue is, right? It's just the information comes in, it gets its timestamp, and it is scheduled in this case, it says in the order received, and then in a certain way, and we haven't gotten to that point yet. But I think that can really also help with, board operations in making it just a day-to-day function of the board clerk. That's, I think, part of the value of some of those that were put in. Okay, so we can continue to think about what sort of safeguards we can give to make sure that scheduling matters is moving forward in the way that you're looking for that to happen. Another issue that I would like to highlight to you is the board amendment process. This is a significant change from our current rules. If we look at Section 5, subsection D, it says that proposed amendments must be provided in writing to the board clerk by email at least 24 hours before the meeting is scheduled to begin. And then those amendments can be offered in the order that they're received during the regular meeting. If someone wants to make an amendment to anything that was submitted before or an amendment from the floor, then there needs to be a motion, second, discussion, and vote on whether or not to suspend the amendment rule so that you can hear that amendment.
Just be on a majority?
That's how the rule is written.
Yeah. So I'm not sure how I exactly feel about this, but I'm just going to raise an issue. So a bunch of amendments get submitted, and it turns out on the dais, and this happens often, it's like, oh, that needs a, like everybody, like, that needs a perfecting amendment. Or because people didn't see them before they got, before they got submitted in the order, it's like, oh, I would have offered another amendment because of like, some downstream impacts. Both examples could be offered. And the only thing that's different from the amendments that just got submitted in the order is those need like a first and a second just to get on the table. And this would be like, you need a third if you're bringing it the day of.
It would be in the first position, but yes. I mean, what it means is that amendments from the floor will each one require a separate step. And as written, it's each one. So if it's,
Right, it'll need a third.
Yeah, or fifth, or, yeah. It'll be.
Or what?
It could be a lot of motions.
So what would the motion be besides? So say there's an approval of an amendment that was submitted in advance, and then somebody's like, I think that needs a perfecting amendment, so I'd like to offer it. And so you need a first and a second, and then you vote on that, and you need at least 3 votes in order to actually get it.
I think this firstly demonstrates that it could be a little bit of a confusing process. But in the way I'm looking at it, if there was an ordinance that was provided in the normal course that says board meetings are on Tuesday, and somebody else wants board meetings to be on Wednesday, so they submit 24 hours in advance an amendment that says, I want to amend this to blah, blah, blah. So that's in there. So now we're at the board meeting. It's in the normal course. We have a motion and a second to hear the ordinance as submitted. And then Tasia would announce we have an amendment which was submitted last week. And Commissioner X, would you like to propose that amendment? And the commissioner can either actually offer it or say, no, I'm not interested. But okay, so let's say they offer it. I offer to amend it to Wednesday. Okay, vote, second. Discussion, where I got it wrong, but you're following me, right? And then, okay, so the ordinance is amended to have board meetings now on Wednesdays. And then someone says, but wait a minute, I really want it to say Wednesdays from 9 to noon. Okay, so that's a new amendment that's made on the floor. In order to offer that amendment, first I need a motion and a second to suspend our board rules requiring 24-hour notice for any amendment. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? If I get a motion in a second, then we go to discussion and we go to vote. And now our board rules have been suspended, and so now I'm going to need a motion, I'm going to need a second to hear the amendment that our meetings are going to be on Wednesdays from 9 to noon. And then we'll go through that. And then at the end of it, if someone says, well, I think it really should be 9 to 2 because I think that would be better. Okay, we're going to need a motion and a second to suspend our rules so that we can have this new, right? So then we would go each time you're having an amendment from the floor, it's going to take 2 votes.
Right, but it's just going to add an additional, just to get it on the table, you have to suspend the rules, but then it passes with the same number of votes. It's not a supermajority. Okay.
And I'll speak to this because I am flexible. I'll tell you the problem I'm trying to solve, and then maybe because I'm not trying to make it cumbersome to make those kind of technical or in the flow amendments. It's more about, let's say somebody has been working on an ordinance and then, work happens, they're adjusting. It's not getting a really substantive amendment until day of or like in the evening of that I personally have a very hard time with. In my learning disability makes it hard for me to like translate from one document to the other and track it. And it's really impossible for me to do it in real time. And so I'm trying to get at that situation where it's not a verbal, let's wordsmith and get it right. It's like, this is a significant track change difference. And my need to have the time to track that difference is something, and again, I will admit that like, it doesn't have to be this exact language. And that if the commission had I wasn't here and somebody else and no other commissioner would need that, I think that's totally fine to change the rules. This is trying to accommodate a specific issue that I have. But I don't want to make it hard to do the wordsmithing and the tweaking. So I don't know if there's a way to parse like a substitute amendment from a technical adjustment, or I don't know what I would call it, but that's what I'm trying to get at, is when it's like a significantly different.
I guess my question would be, because it could happen still that it could be substantive, right, in the moment?
Yeah.
And so in that case, this rule wouldn't help, because we could make the motion to do it anyway on the amendment, so then we would likely want to move to an actual postponement or something to give people time if there's a substantial in the moment.
Yeah, and for me, again, this is very me specific. I actually process verbal fine, so I can do that.
Yeah.
It's written that I have a hard time with.
So one way that in another body I've been in has dealt with this is if it's a substantive amendment, the actual, that comes on the dais the day of, that they move the vote to just the next meeting. And it's, the chair rules on whether it's substantive. And it usually works out because, like, frankly, if it is a substantive amendment that gets offered on the day of, you think about it also, not only do board members not have seen it, but also the public hasn't had a chance to weigh in on it. And so by kicking it to the next meeting, if anybody wants to come and speak about it, and again, obviously if you have an.
That's what I was just saying, the postponement kind of, and moving it.
Yeah, so postponement is already and will be available under our rules at any time. We can also do adjournments for a period of time so that you could take some time to review and process information in a way that best meets your style of learning or your way of learning. So those are tools that are available. Another thing that I was thinking of as you were talking.
I'm sorry, Jenny, are you saying that we'd have to proactively do that, or it's baked into the rules? Again, other bodies have been in, it's like baked into the rules. If you have a substantive change that is on the dais at that meeting, that the approval just goes to the next meeting.
Okay, so that is not in our rules currently, and that would be a significant departure from our current rules or from these rules. I think that with respect to this board, I think most of your amendments are substantive. And, the ones oftentimes that come the day of will be, substantive means making a difference, and I think most of the amendments that we're making are making actually a pretty significant difference. So that could be an exception that swallows the rule, but it sounds like you've been on a board that works, so that's a good thing for this board to talk about. It could be a scheduling, I'll call it challenge, when things are, moving to the next meeting. But definitely something for further conversation.
Yeah.
One thing that I was thinking of, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to just jump in here because I think one of the things that we haven't used as much. So first of all, I think that there is something here about trying to get things 24 hours in advance. And aside from, this was even before you were on the board, Commissioner Moyer, but there have been a lot of commissioners who vocalized on the dais, like, I need to see things 24 hours in advance so I really understand an amendment 24 hours in advance, so I understand what's being proposed, and I can think about this in terms of the overall, resolution or budget or whatever it was that was being amended. So that is something that I've heard before. I do also, though, have concerns about requiring it in a way that will add a lot of process to things, so I think some flexibility there. But the other thing that we haven't used, and I haven't used as the presiding officer much, is the opportunity to recess, or a commissioner asking for a recess to take some time to be able to review an amendment, or take some time to be able to think about. And I think that's also, instead of necessarily like automatically moving something over to the next meeting, because I agree, I think that could lead to scheduling challenges if we had a full meeting already for the next one, is just having an opportunity to have a little more space for folks as if there is something new that comes up. You know, so what I would love to see is the board as a practice, we provide 24 hours notice to amendments whenever possible. However, we also can retain the, basically the right of a member of this board to bring amendments in the meeting. And we, you know, but then people should feel free to call for a recess if they need time to contemplate it or something. Because I'm the opposite of you. I don't do well with, you know, oral. My ADHD is like, I need to see it in writing and be able to see it, so.
And to that point, and to other points that have been made here, there are some other parts of the rules where we put things aspirationally, and that could be helpful. That could be a helpful tool here. Under, like, Section 4, for example, says that ideally board members will attend in person, right? And then it says, you know, that you can attend on occasion online. And that's really just setting the board's expectation that we're going to set this time for meetings, and ideally, we're all going to be here and present. So we could use language like that over in Section 5, subsection D, that says ideally, amendments will be provided in writing 24 hours in advance, which is something we've talked about as a body previously.
One other thing, as long as we're talking about materials, I would like to ask that we add a sentence that if materials that have been submitted are changed, that all board members get before the board meeting the track changes of what specifically has been changed, because this having to guess in a 30-page, like, not just like the resolution, but also like it needs a presentation, but it's sort of like if you actually prepare in advance, and then the last minute something else comes in, like we took out some slides, so the page numbers are all different, or we changed something and we haven't specifically told you what it is, and it's really hard to understand that. So I think that's fundamentally, if somebody's going to make a last minute change.
And that's,
This was
so
a test.
the section that Commissioner is talking about now, we're at Section 5, subsection B1. Last sentence says any changes or additions to the materials, information, or presentations in the finalized agenda packet will be submitted 24 hours prior to the start of the meeting. So we have that in there, and you're saying like a little bit more about track changes, or at least identifying what changes have been made?
At any time, okay, so if something gets posted, I mean, on Fridays, I print everything out and read it over the weekend. And so when somebody like, oh, I decided to change my presentation on Monday, and then it gets sent out, like, there's a new, you know, there's a substitute presentation, it's like, well, what did you change? And like, once you,
And I think that brings forward two really good points. One is that in this section, it says that the information and presentations to be presented to the board will be submitted to the board clerk 24 hours in advance of the meeting. And am I hearing from board members that that is something that they would like to keep in, that 24-hour requirement?
wait, I thought we get materials the Friday before.
This is if
These
you
are
make
the
a change.
Changes or additions.
Yeah.
Oh, changes or addition.
Maybe it's, and you include what has been changed.
Right, in track
Like, so-
change, like by page. I mean, it's,
Track changes on slides are hard, so I know sometimes they call out, here's the change and the specific slide number.
it's fine to be like slide 12.
Yeah.
You know, here's the change, but it can't be, we've summarized something
Yeah,
differently. I mean, it has to be what words have changed, because especially when we're voting on something.
And so this this is only about materials and like presentations, it's not going to be changes to your board adopted documents. That would have to be done through an amendment process.
Still.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
So this is presentations, or like for today, right, we're contemplating these board rules, so if there had been a change this morning for the board rules, like that would need, and so I think this is good. A couple things. It says 24 hours. You know, everybody tries their best. We have gotten things from people like the morning of that is like, oh, change discovered last night or something like that. So right now it says must be. So must is, you know, like if it's not submitted by 24 hours, then do we not contemplate that change, or does it, I just, you know, that's kind of like, do we not have that change then? That's what I think we need to discuss. And then the other piece is, I think like having a requirement that any changes need to be either tracked by change if possible or noted to the board clerk, so that when the board, because this is really the board clerk's then responsibility to make sure the updated materials are posted and dispersed to the board. So I think it's, and you know, making sure that the board clerk knows, you know, what changes so that they can communicate that.
You're right, with specificity, that's my big thing. We had something recently where it was like a summary, and it actually was a substantive change, but you couldn't tell that from like just a generic kind of like, it's been updated.
Yeah. And so that conversation is helpful, and I think that we can implement that into the rule. I will just loop back to what the chair said, which is requiring that materials be presented to you the week before and then no changes within 24 hours will be challenging for people. And that's just through experience and watching, because we'll often see people bringing things and passing them out and whatnot. So let's just keep an eye on it and see if this is a sort of rule that actually helps us get the timely information to the board as it's needed, or if it creates some barrier that we want to address in the future. Another major change that I talked about earlier, at least reference, was that again in section 5, subsection E, it's the board clerk who oversees the agenda preparation. This is a change from our prior board rule where it was the chair.
Sorry, where were we?
5E.
Yeah. So that's just to note. 5F now talks about time-certain matters, and these are things that we've touched a little bit already in our agenda. This, I think it serves multiple purposes for the board. It's the board members who can request these time-certain agenda matters. There'd be up to 2 per meeting. They'd be up to 60 minutes long, inclusive of all presentations and public testimony. And in scheduling these time-certain matters, when we get to subsection G, we'll see are scheduled right up at the front of the meeting, right after the consent agenda and public testimony, so on non-agenda items. So it's, those are going to be 2, that's 120 minutes currently scheduled for every regular meeting, which includes briefings and our Thursday board meetings. So
Up to.
up to.
Up to.
That was
So
what I was gonna-
Everybody,
please
come
don't
on,
do
everybody will
60
take the
minutes.
time.
I do want to clarify that it's county elected officials, not just commissioners. So the sheriff and the DA are also,
And the auditor.
and the auditor are also able to.
Yeah, and that's in the board rules.
And so so it's county elected officials, remembering that the district attorney is not a county elected official, it's a state elected official. So as written, this would include our board members here and the auditor and the sheriff. Yeah.
So we would need to add the DA if we wanted to allow the DA to.
These are your board rules. So if you wanted to allow the district attorney, for example, to have a guaranteed time-certain matter during your board meetings, that would be up to you.
So is that a change?
No. The district attorney?
No, I mean, what does our current board rules say? Because we currently do say elected officials. Do we just not say county elected officials?
So the district attorney, along with the COO's office and department directors, can submit APRs for placement on the board agenda. And those matters will be scheduled in the order that's outlined in subsection G. However, as written, only the Multnomah County elected officials can use this time-certain slot, these 2 time-certain slots. So that's keeping those 2 separate. Did I make that clear enough? Did we follow?
No, I'm just looking at our current rules because.
Okay, yeah, currently it says something along the lines like county elected officials, the DA, it might list them out, the district attorney, the auditor, and department directors.
It does list them out.
Yeah, can submit APRs, which are just agenda placement forms on a regular agenda. That's still the case. This time certain slot is an additional opportunity for our board members and our other elected officials, the auditor and the sheriff, to request these special, I'll say, up to 60-minute slots during every regular agenda meeting that will be held towards the front of the meeting. And that timing and scheduling was suggested based on some of the input of the board members and saying, like, we have these really big things going, we have people coming to speak, let's have those things heard first before some of the other county business, which maybe doesn't have, it's more staff time as opposed to invited guests.
You're my commissioner.
Section 8, L, agenda items may be taken out of order by the presiding officer for the purpose of making time certains on schedule, making the most efficient use of staff time, or to hear the testimony of an elected official or other invited guests. I could see the issue with time certain because, like, a time certain is a time certain. And I talked to the chair about this morning. One of the things that I'm concerned about, like, making the most efficient use of time, of staff time. When people come to our meetings and want to, say, provide public comment on something we're voting on, if the order gets changed around and they took time off work or they got childcare or whatever reason so they could come, and then it just gets moved around, like, to save staff time, I'm concerned that it sort of undermines the, public's, like, is this a public process? Because you're just moving things around for, like, your own benefit, the boards or the staff's, convenience versus, like, hey, I looked at the agenda, it said this is when this is going to be heard. I'm wondering, and to keep the flexibility, but to say something to the effect of that ideally we'll try and.
Where are we, sorry?
Sorry, it's 8L.
8L.
Something that just, like, ideally we'll try and stick in it so that the public can engage, according to the posted agenda. We'll try and stick to the time, or like I say, when people show up and, like, oh, we already, we were ahead of schedule, so we already just moved that, or we just moved things around and you missed the thing that you took time off work and got childcare for.
Yeah.
Again, I'm for flexibility. I just think we should also have some sort of piece in there that we want to respect that people, if they looked at our agenda and want to come weigh in on something, that they actually have an opportunity to do that.
And I think that a rather simple amendment there could be changing the wording to say something like making the most efficient use of the board and public's time. I think staff time is not always talking about individual, it's about, like, everybody in the room.
Actually, that doesn't quite get it. I think there just should be another sentence, something like, because the public relies on, a posted agenda, the, presiding officer will try and generally keep to the.
So what if we say something like, consideration should be given to the ability of the public to have like reasonable certainty on when agenda.
Yeah, something like that. Again,
Yeah.
keeping the flexibility, but
Yeah.
because that, having had that happen to me before, it's like such a bummer. It's like, oh, I spent all night getting my 2 minutes ready and missed it.
And we have heard that from people who come to our meetings and want to participate and have me use their voice before the board.
I have another one kind of in that same vein on section 10. 10A, the presiding officer may regulate the length of public participation and limit appearances to presentation of relevant points. I get the second half, but the other thing that really causes, especially for people who aren't professional testifiers, is when they think they're going to get 3 minutes and then it's like, we're changing it, just randomly, not at, like, say a big budget meeting, but it just, like, all of our normal meetings, you get 3 minutes and then it just show up. So I would have some other, again, kind of keeping the flexibility, but another statement at the end, like, generally that will be, if it's going to be different, that will be noticed in advance?
Well, we changed the way that public comment happens. Maybe that needs to be in here as well. Because we made those adjustments at the beginning of this year, so it's not as many slots where that has to happen. So I think that's kind of helped, though. We don't have to cut it off early because we addressed it in that one change that we made that we didn't make to all the board rules.
Yes, and that has been really helpful for the non-agenda testimony. I think this also, though, gets to the agenda item testimony as well. The section 10, number A is all public participation.
Do we not have similar time slots for that too, or number of slots for that too?
We don't have a number of time slots for individual agenda items. And so that is where the flexibility, because, and I will say when this comes up, that we've had to, again, like always wanting to try to give as much time for the public who want to weigh in on matters as possible. However, sometimes we end up with an item that we don't know is going to generate a lot of public interest, but then we end up getting, 20-some people to testify. And in order to make sure that we were, having efficient use of time for the meetings and the conversation, and this happens in the legislature too, you do have to limit it from 3 minutes to 2 minutes or something like that. And so I wouldn't want to take away that flexibility because sometimes it's required.
So I'm not suggesting taking away that, rather just adding giving people an advance notice. I mean, people get I know a lot of people get very nervous if they don't testify often in public. And so they've got their all prepared, and then they get here and, they're told it's short. So as much advance notice if it's going to be different from what we regularly do is what I would suggest. So if we know in advance, hey, we've already got 15 people signed up, and the presiding officer feels that, hey, we're going to have to go down to 2 minutes, that, for example, the board clerk could email people hey, you're going to get 2 minutes tomorrow, not X amount.
Yeah, and I think when we know that ahead of time, we can say that. So right now on our website for public comment, it does say public comment is limited to 3 minutes or less per person unless otherwise stated at the meeting. The board clerk will also announce the end of your allotted time. So we do say it may be 3 minutes or less. So I think that again, when possible, the board clerk will provide advance notice.
If it's going to be shorter.
Of a change of,
It's going from 3 minutes to 2 minutes is cutting a third of a speech.
Yeah, and it does, and sometimes it needs to happen. So, okay, yeah, so when possible, we can work on that language then.
I've got a couple as well in section 1B, number 2. Requests for language interpretation must be made 48 hours in advance of a meeting. I think we want to be a little more flexible about that to really meet the spirit of what we're trying to do, and the fact that people may not necessarily know 48 hours ahead of time. We're going to try to accommodate people's needs and access needs at our board meetings. I don't know if it makes sense to just have more flexibility instead of a must, knowing we may not always be able to get interpretation in, but that we're not kind of limiting people or having people self-select out of showing up because they didn't request 48 hours in advance.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think that we could say should, right? And that gives a little flexibility. And then the last sentence of that says the county will make good faith effort to accommodate all reasonable language interpretation requests. That was a sort of attempt to get to that, if it's 24 hours, but maybe we can make that more explicit.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. I don't mean to belabor this, but I still don't feel like I have good clarity on how we're going to handle the time certain issue that I raised. And I don't see in here, I see a lot of how to request and submit an APR and a deadline for notice about the public meetings. I don't see a lot about the deadline for submitting. So I could submit an APR a week ahead of time.
So the deadline for submitting, let's get there. That is on the Wednesday before. Okay, so section 5, sub B, 3I. So a finalized agenda packet must be submitted for regular meetings, which are going to be Tuesday or Thursday meetings, on the Wednesday at noon, 1 week prior to the requested board meeting date.
Gotcha, thank you.
We still have more discussion to have about, like, you know, how, is it just an APR that is going to save your time? Do you want to do that 2 weeks ahead of time, a temperature check? Are you really going to get your materials in? What happens if you say, yes, you're going to get your materials in, but then, like, things happen and you don't meet the deadline? Can materials be submitted late? All of those sorts of things are some of the nuts and bolts that make scheduling really challenging for our board clerk. And then, you know, I hope that we can use these tools to empower ourselves to say, like, I didn't meet the deadline, you know, not the board clerk's issue, and now it's going to have to be bumped. So I think there's a little bit more work to do there, and maybe we can all think on that. And how are we doing on time, Chair?
Yeah, we have 7 minutes before noon. So there was.
So, I'm sorry, I still had one more.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Section 8 on voting, Section 8, number B. It is unclear, either this is missing quotations around call for the vote, as in we're, or I guess I don't quite understand the way this is written. Is it trying to call to question and force a vote? Is it, and why are we moving to 2/3 of members? And how does 2/3, that math makes my brain hurt when we have 5 people.
Well, here's the good news. We will not be cutting commissioners in half. So there will be no 0.5. So starting with the 2/3, that means we always need 3 to pass anything with our Board of County Commissioners, right? So if we have 3 commissioners present during a meeting, then all 3 need to vote in order to call for the vote, which basically means we're ending discussion.
Yeah.
And the reason why that 2/3 was put in there, or one of the reasons, was that if we're going to be ending public discussion by the board on any matter, that some greater level of approval might be desirable. It doesn't have to be. It could be majority vote. That's up to you. But if you're 3 commissioners, then it's 3 votes. If you have 4 commissioners present, then it's 3 votes. If you have 5 commissioners present, then it's 4 votes, because we are not.
To end the discussion.
Yes, to call the vote.
So I would prefer to stick with majority like it is through the rest of our board rules. It's the only place that, and granted, I just got the most recent version, but that's the only place that I noticed that.
So,
Okay.
one of the things, sort of my guiding principles when I think about the rules is you always want the majority should be able to get their work done, and the minority should be able to get their voices heard or their ideas on the table. But they shouldn't, as they're doing that, prevent the majority from doing their work. I feel just having a simple majority could, in fact, not allow the minority to have their vote, and it's, you know, almost half the, given we're such a small board, it's almost half the, like, you could have 2 commissioners who feel like, I didn't even have a chance to have a discussion about this or get my questions answered, and it's already being moved to a vote. So I like the
Higher level.
The higher level, I'm going to call it a supermajority. Again, a minority shouldn't prevent the majority of the board from getting their work done, but I do believe that they also should have an opportunity to get their question answered, and also have an opportunity to present their ideas within a reasonable time limit.
Okay, so that is obviously an area where we need to have further discussion.
Yeah.
I had a couple more that I wanted to make sure just got on the record. We don't need to have conversations about them now because we are running out of time. And then Commissioner Jones-Dixon, I want to make sure you have time to get any of your. Oh, it's already in there, included. Okay, great. That's okay. So for me, there is, here we go. So going back up to, where are we? So in Section 1A7. So it's all decisions of the presiding officer may be subject to appeal by motion. That actually differs from Robert's Rules of Order, as far as I can tell, in that Robert's Rules of Order says, okay, where did I just? It's like serious considerations, and I just lost it, hold on. Shoot, I had it up. It's different in that, like, it's a substantial decision, but it puts kind of a descriptor around decisions in terms of, it calls it substantial decisions. So it's not like, hey, we're going to recess. Oh, like I want to, appeal that decision or something. It limits it more to substantial decisions. And I just think from the orderly working of a board, I think having that characterization of the types of decision would be more helpful.
Section 2AC, it is on the committees, and this says the chair will present a list of assignments for board approval. This actually needs sort of a qualifier because there are things in statute, there are also things in IGAs where there's an alternative appointment process, and I think the ordinance says that this will be for like advisory committees, but that's not what this says. So for example, AOC, they have their own process. LIPSIC it's in statute how it's done. So I think this needs like another sentence that shares that it's alternative, there are other ways in which appointments are made, not just by the chair.
Yeah, I actually, and it's kind of the flip side, because some things actually require the chair to make the appointment, right? So I think it has to go both ways. So, because I had that similar comment, there needs to be language added here that, like, unless otherwise required by, unless otherwise required by, I don't know what the required by would be, but like, existing, yeah. Yeah, that's what I mean. We need a word that will take all of that in.
I can find those words.
I bet you can, Jenny McCord. I have faith in you.
The other question I have is on 7C. Like, really, two board members can meet and compel the other people to come, and we can send the sheriff to get the other ones? Like, why is that in here?
So
Like the legislature.
So that's in charter, I think.
That's in charter?
It's in charter. Okay, but this is, which brings up though.
I didn't know what power I potentially could have with one of my other colleagues.
So this is an issue, or this is something that we're creating a brand new type of meeting here, which is an emergency meeting that has not been in our charter, that wasn't in our charter. I don't know if it's in state law, but like this is never something that we've had as a board for. I don't even know. We do have special meetings, which in the special meetings are in charter. Special meetings can be called by, 3 members of the board. We've had at least one of those as a board this year. I don't know what the intention of the emergency meeting is or why it would be needed, because it wouldn't be covered by a regular or special meeting as our current charter and rules state.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Chair. Emergency meetings are allowed under public meetings law and always have been. We just didn't have them actually called out in our board rules. And we didn't need to call them out in our board rules because state law already, provides for it. And one of the things that these rules that staff, when they were putting it together, they wanted to pull in and add some citations to things to help sort of people understand when they're looking at the rules, does this come from somewhere else? And so you'll see a little parentheticals, and it'll say charter section this, or we'll refer to public meetings law. There's some of that reference back and forth. That's a legislative choice, not always a great choice, because those other documents could change, and of course you don't need to repeat like what the law says when it already says it. But for the ease of use, I think that there was some stylistic choices to add in those things. And so that's kind of where emergency meetings come in, because they're there. An emergency meeting is different from our other meetings because a special meeting requires 24 hours notice. But an emergency meeting can happen so long as we provide like the soonest practicable notice to the public. And so as soon as reasonably practical is what the law says. And so
This just needs context. If it's like, if this is just for an emergency meeting, if that's what the charter, I don't have the charter with me right now, but if that's what the charter is referencing, but it just seems like a random, like, hey, you can call a meeting for this, but if that's the specific section, it's the charter that it's referring to?
So it's not in our
It seems like
charter.
it'll be faster
It's
to
state
just do
law.
a special meeting than to try and
It
get
says
the
charter.
sheriff out.
Where?
Right.
Well, it says charter 3.30.
Oh, this is section 4D, special meeting.
No, I'm looking at section, this is for attendance and quorum. It's 7C.
Okay, I think we're in two different sections, but they both refer to emergency meeting. So
Okay. I think the cure for this is just to add like what the reference to, because otherwise it just seems like, hey, you could,
Okay, so just to be clear, Section 7C refers to compelling the attendance of members. It does not need to be at a special, emergency, or regular meeting. It could be at any type of meeting, and that would be, I mean, this is in our charter. This is something that I'm not aware that our board has ever done, or if we even tried to get the sheriff to do it, if the sheriff would like, go round you up. But it is in the charter, and so that's what is referenced.
for any purpose.
For attendance at a meeting. At a duly noticed public meeting, yes. And then the emergency meeting section is, and again, I'm not aware that we've ever had an emergency meeting, but it would be in the case of a true emergency, and the law requires that an actual emergency must be identified and included in the notice, and so it would be, you know, it's an emergency, right? We'll say a conflagration, which is a fancy word for fire, happens in some area of our community that affects public health, and we need to have a public meeting this afternoon at 4 p.m., and the Board of County Commissioners, we're going to get in touch with Tasia, the emergency notice goes out, we say the basis for it, and then we're all going to show up here or online to address this emergent situation for which no earlier notice could be given, because it's a true emergency. That said, we don't have to include it in the board rules because it's already required by state law. So if this board feels that including an emergency meeting when we also have special meetings, executive sessions, regular meetings, board briefings, emergency ordinance, unanimous consent items, and all of these different things, if you find it confusing, we can take it out. It's still a tool that's available because it's provided by state law. So that's up to you.
Okay, that's helpful. I'm trying to look at my notes to see if there's anything else I want to make sure gets raised. And again, I'm kind of looking at my notes from an old version and then trying to match up to see if they were.
Oh, welcome to my.
I know. Oh, yeah, so something was included there. I just wanted to make sure the county attorney had at least 3 days' notice for review, right? And Jenny, is that sufficient? 3 days to review?
Nobody gives me 3 days ever, so it would be wonderful if I ever got. Sometimes it's just minutes.
So I think one that hasn't been raised, and I think it's still in this, hold on, let me do a little word search here. So it's section 2A, sub B, sub Roman numeral 2. If there is a vacancy in the vice chair position, the board will appoint a vice chair from the next numerical commissioner district at the first regular meeting following the vacancy. So we don't normally have vacancies in positions because we have designated people to fill in. So I'm just curious about when this situation might occur.
So this is a great opportunity. We're going to put a little parenthetical at the end, and we're going to reference Charter, section 4.4, which the term vacancy is a term of art, which means that your seat has been vacated. It means death, incapacity, resignation. It's listed in the charter. It's not, I'm not available. It's not, I'm an incapacitated, or you could be ruled adjudicated incapacitated as well. So these are like, that's when your seat is actually vacant. And it would be at that time that other portions of our charter and our code would come into play about how we fill the vacancy. Is it with an interim designee? Is it with a vote? Is it with, you know, we go through that. So that's what that is saying. So here, if that vice chair position becomes vacant, if you know, District 7 is the vice chair and they resign from office, then that would become vacant, and then that's when we would go and appoint a new vice chair. So that's the purpose of that section.
Okay, but when that seat was filled again, then does it go back to that district? No.
Not as written. It would have, the board would have already appointed a new vice chair. Now you could appoint the interim designee.
Gotcha. Okay.
And we're already going to know who the interim designee is in like 99.9% of the cases, because commissioners will have appointed an interim designee who is eligible to serve. So that could be, the board could use that tool in that way.
Okay, thank you. That explanation was really helpful for me. So we're over time. Commissioner Jones-Dixon, or you said yours were captured. Is there anything else folks want to get on the, just kind of raised for discussion?
Not now, but I don't promise that I won't
Yes.
have different.
We may have more. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I did just quickly want to bring up to the board, which I think is a great addition, is that the maker of a motion may withdraw the motion at any time before the vote is called. And this is just a very, it gives us a little bit of elegance in the way of pulling something back instead of requiring it to be voted on.
Okay. Well, thank you, Brendan. I know Reagan's not here, but I know that she's worked on it. I also want to thank Jenny Smith for the work on starting this off, and then Mary Hall Caballero, who helped get this, and then, of course, you, Jenny Madcore, for all of your advice, great advice as we were working through this process. So thanks, everyone, for the discussion today. That ends our meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, February 12th, 2026 at 9:30 a.m. There being no further business, we are adjourned.